Kids who have trouble paying attention, they have trouble sitting still. They don't like to read books so much. They have trouble focusing on hard, difficult tasks. Sometimes they have trouble even playing with other kids quietly. They're the ones running around, fidgeting, knocking things down, climbing all over things. They can be the life of the party.
So I would like to identify in as quickly a way as possible how ADHD can be diagnosed for anyone at any time. And it's not because of necessarily that there isn't a quantifiable category of people who struggle with attention. Of course there is. We're in this is an adaptive way to deal with possibly a technology-based society, and a society also which requires that people from ages 6 to 18 sit in the same seat, relatively, for most of the day, and then are diagnosed by school counselors or other mental health professionals. But I hold in my hand here the DSM-5. This might be the most recent edition, but I'm not exactly sure. It's the TR. They probably came out with one since then because all the experts who run these types of boards, the American Psychiatric Association, are the ones that need to justify their existence and make their side money by creating new standards for all of these different mental health. And they like to follow the ideological winds that blow through society at the times that they write these. So in order to make a paycheck, they certainly revisit a lot of these mental health disorders. However, it's not because of the nature of attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder that makes it easy to diagnose anyone with it. It's with the broadness of the categories of the criteria that they use. So I'll go over it in about 5 minutes or less, I hope. Often fidgets or taps hands, often leaves seat in situations, often runs about or climbs in situations where they shouldn't, often unable to engage in activities quietly, often on the go, often talks excessively, often blurts out an answer, often has difficulty waiting their turn, and often interrupts or intrudes. Now, you need to meet 5 out of 9 of those criteria, and it has to happen before age 12. However, the problem with the diagnostic criteria that they put out there is that every single one of them starts with the word often. And so if your school counselor or, God forbid, someone who has an incentive structure built around keeping someone in treatment, keeping someone medicated, keeping someone engaged as a customer, if that person has a child or, for that matter, an adult come into their office who they want to meet these criteria, or maybe they even broadly think that it'll help them to have that diagnosis, and they see the word often at the beginning of each one of these 9 criteria, they are able to. So I looked up the definition. What's the word often mean? And it says several times within an extended period or something. And so there isn't even, this is supposed to be, I understand psychology is a soft science, but this isn't even quantifiable. So how can we be scientific in how we judge often? Because if I'm one sex or the other, there are different expectations about how much fidgeting would be required in order to meet the criteria of often. How much leaving your seat would be required to meet the criteria of often. And as I've said previously, we're often treating boys like malfunctioning girls. And so these criteria, if I come in, so most therapists are women, no offense to women, I believe they provide a great service to the industry and to the field. However, if they're seeing a boy and they're like, man, that just is aberrant, that is malfunctioning, it could quite simply be that they're seeing a bunch of boys for ADHD and they're projecting their own understanding of what it means to often fidget into the boy realm, and they don't add up correctly because their experience, as much as they might try to separate it, isn't applicable. So the fact that all of these 9 criteria in the DSM-5 say often as the quantifiable way to tell whether you have these symptoms or not means that it's probably easy enough to diagnose whoever you want with it. And while I actually have loved ones and some of my dear friends who suffer from attention deficit, I don't think it's fair to the individual that the healthcare provider can simply invent what it means to often struggle with one of these symptoms and then diagnose whoever they want with it. And by the way, they have an incentive to do so because they get paid monthly for every one person that they are able to diagnose with this. So, and the medication that they give often is so addictive that it would be very compelling and very easy for an individual who has this diagnosis to have to return to the doctor in order to continue to accomplish the things that they want to, because many of them are juiced with amphetamines or other, parallel substances that give them the ability to concentrate. And while it doesn't necessarily give them a methamphetamine rush like it would a typical person, it's still a very powerful substance that, obviously given to like a 6 or an 8 or a 12-year-old child, is signing them up to be a customer for at least 12 years or however long until they turn 18 and possibly through college, and then why not into adulthood, except your brain will tolerate those substances over time and you'll need to take more or switch, and therefore you're setting them up. And actually, as a counselor, now I see them come through my office door because they've dealt with a lifetime of addiction because, the medical industrial complex didn't work out for them, and so they sought to self-medicate, and then they become my customer because I'm an addiction therapist. So please, I don't want to see your kid later in life maybe have some second guessing about the criteria that are being levied in these books, so that you don't incentivize a provider to give them a diagnosis without cause.